Welcome back to The Nuance. It is Monday, December 23rd, the start of arguably the holiday week, the busiest week of the year where everybody is traveling for all of the things. Everything is going on. Tomorrow is Christmas Eve. The next day is Christmas. A week after that is New Year's. I myself am traveling this year on Christmas Day, flying home to Pittsburgh and then flying back on New Year's Day. Both of those were by far the cheapest options when it comes to travel this year from an airline ticket perspective. It was absolutely insane any single day outside of that. And so I believe this is the first for me, definitely the first for us as a family, as an entire unit with Catherine and Alba, my wife, and my daughter flying on the holidays. So we will see how that goes. I am optimistic, but cautiously optimistic, I will say, as I think everybody is seemingly at this point when it comes to the holidays, the end of the year, when it comes to their health and fitness goals. I've been having a lot of conversations with clients and also those who are just followers on Instagram, those that I associate with and speak with on social media in general regarding concerns, worries, fears, and things that are just on the top of our minds as we head into, again, what is arguably the busiest week of the year from a travel perspective, which then logically leads to it being potentially the most challenging week of the year from a dietary perspective, from an exercise regimen perspective. There's lots of things on people's minds that are seemingly roadblocks, seemingly challenges and obstacles to reaching your health and fitness goals. So yesterday, I actually put up a poll on my Instagram that just asked people if they were traveling this week or not. Surprisingly, the majority of the responses were actually no. Out of those that said yes, they are, I then asked, well, what are your major concerns when it comes to your health and fitness goals due to that travel? And I got a multitude of responses. A lot of them were similar, kind of two groups of people, two camps where there's a lot of worry, there's a lot of concern, and then those who don't have much of any, that feel really good, feel really confident heading into this week of travel. And the ones that do have those worries, that do have those fears, those anxieties, if you will, some of those responses were food options and being out of my typical workout routine, being out of routine from meals to workouts and really everything in between. It's hard. When I travel, my biggest concern is finding a gym, time or space to fit in a decent workout, not having all of my supplements with me or eating enough protein. A couple more along those lines are the stigma of holiday meals and the pressure to participate, the insane amount of pastries that my mom has at her place, or not enough movement, not enough water, not great sleep, right? So those are the types of responses that are coming from what I would probably say is the majority of people. This is representative of the majority of the population, those that have some concerns about how this week is going to go. But then I do have to give some credit to those that are really comfortable and confident going into this week. Some of them saying, I have no concerns. I won't take any of the credit here, but since I started following you, I know that eating off a normal schedule for a few days or even a week doesn't change much. I'll be back to normal when we return, and I'll still get in movement and lift in, even if it looks a little different. Amazing. Absolutely love that. A couple of responses from current clients and people that I've worked with in the past said nothing because you were my coach. Again, not going to take all of the credit here, but that's nice to hear. Another one was nothing because I'm a professional traveler after working with you. Now, these do make me feel good, but more than anything else, I want to use those to segue into some examples of the messaging that I have given to literally those exact people who sent those responses in, but those that I work with around these holidays, these events, these periods and seasons of our life when things pick up, when there's a lot of out of routine elements going on, when there's a lot of travel, work deadlines, or time off of work, anything that's a deviation from our norm. How do we handle that? How do we build up that confidence going into these situations? And I think it starts with, more than anything else, perspective, mindset. And so I want to provide some concrete, tangible strategies as to how you can go about prioritizing your health and your fitness, your diet and your exercise during this time. But I think before we get there to those tangible, actionable steps, we have to take a step back, think bigger picture, take a broader perspective here of what is our actual goal, right? The abstract concept of what are we trying to accomplish during these periods of time, that's where I think that I am able to really get through to people and change the way that they view these seasons going into them, and thus have different outcomes after the fact in the moment, but also reflecting on them afterwards for years to come. Because some of these people that I have gotten these responses from, I've been working with for years, or I have worked with years ago. And so these are the things that really click. If you change the way that you think, you change the way that you act ultimately. So the way that I help people do that, my personal strategy that I find works the best when it comes to getting through to people, connecting with them, having things make sense, is utilizing analogies in my explanations. So this specific concept in terms of periods of time when we have a vast majority of deviation to our norm. What is our goal? What is our real tangible outcome that we can then determine as or dictate success, as opposed to the perception that most people have is failure, missing the bar, falling short, not following through with the things that they should think that they should be doing, or know that they should be doing, or intend to do during this season. And a couple of the analogies that I use, there's two of them. One of them I will call the curveball analogy, which I'll talk about in a minute. The first one that I think is a little bit more relative and it can be appreciated and accepted and understood by a bigger majority of people is what I call the duck analogy. So when we think about people who have their stuff together, right? People that are really, really organized, people that are really successful, those that don't seem to struggle, at least externally, right? We look at them and say, that person knows what they are doing. That person is always prepared. That person has always got their stuff in order, right? The saying that we use to describe that person, or what we use to describe us trying to get to that place, is I need to get my ducks in a row, where that person has all of their ducks in a row, right? It just describes a very tight-knit formation, systematic approaches to things, if you will. And that comes from, logically, at least I've always thought it to come from, the literal animal in nature, ducks, right? We see them fly in a V formation. We see them crossing the road in a super straight, tight-knit line, right? And so that's where it comes from. That person has all of their ducks in a row, or I need to get all of my ducks in a row. But I live in Florida. I live in a neighborhood where there are bodies of water everywhere surrounding me. So every day, basically, when I'm walking around, when I'm driving in and out of my neighborhood, I see ducks in the wild, in nature, when they are not on the go, when they are not traveling. And what that actually looks like are some ducks swimming in the water, some ducks climbing up out of the water bank, some ducks in the road. Sometimes they're getting caught in the storm drains. They're literally everywhere, right? They are actually scattered. Sure, they're all in the same general vicinity. They're all in the same neighborhood. They all stay together, generally speaking, but they are never in that tight-knit formation when you just come across them in the wild. It's only when they are actually on the go, when they are traveling, when they're flying, that you see them fall into formation. And that is what I find is more representative of our actual outcome that we are intending to create when it comes to traveling in regards to our health and fitness goals. We essentially need to take on the role of mother duck, and our ducklings are our priority. And what our real goal is, our real intention is to make sure that when we go anywhere, when we leave, when we travel, we take every single one of those with us. Now, once we get to our destination, they don't have to stay in that perfect tight-knit formation. They can be a little bit chaotic. They can be a little bit scattered. But if we take our ducklings with us, that's ultimately what success boils down to. And what am I talking about? What kinds of things am I talking about when I say our ducklings or our priorities, right? Well, I'm talking about things like protein. I'm talking about things like fiber. I'm talking about things like movement or our activity level. I'm talking about things like sleep, right? Very basic priorities that we want to make sure that we are still considering when choosing anything, when making any decisions when it comes to what we're doing throughout the day, the meals that we're having, what we're having in those meals, the activities that we do throughout the day, so that those main priorities stay just that. They stay at the forefront of our thoughts, our actions, and our behaviors. So your goal is not perfection with the actual actions themselves. Our goal is not unaltered action. Our goal is to just make sure that the actions that we do take, the behaviors that we do exhibit and exude are actually in line with those goals, those objectives, making sure that we get in protein, fiber, movement, sleep, water, what have you, right? So I think it starts with really, really analyzing what our goal is and our objective, because perfectionism is the biggest cause of perceived failure, because oftentimes we expect action that is unaltered in any way. And that's not realistic. And it's not necessary, right? We just want to sustain the priorities. How we go about carrying them out or abiding by them can certainly change. And that kind of leads me into the second analogy, which isn't as appreciated as the first, because you kind of have to be a sports fan and specifically a baseball fan to understand this. But when I talk through it, logically, it makes sense, even if you're not a baseball fan. So I call this one the curveball analogy. And it starts off by, or the way that I start off or introduce it, is painting the picture of the exact opposite of the season that we're talking about right now. No travel, no crazy work deadlines, sleep regressions with children, nothing, right? Everything's actually really, really routine. Day to day is monotonous. Everything looks the same. It's like Groundhog Day over and over and over again, right? I look at that as analogous to a professional baseball player being thrown a fastball down the middle every single time they are up to bat. It's the same exact pitch coming at the same exact speed, right down the middle. Eventually, the goal and the objective of making contact with the ball, hitting the ball, becomes mindless. That batter could do it with their eyes closed because they know exactly what's coming, right? And that's like what life is like when things are simple, easy, predictable, right? But if you're a professional baseball player, how often are you going to be thrown a fastball right down the middle? Not all that often. More often than not, the pitcher is going to throw you a curveball. They're going to throw you a slider. They're going to throw you a changeup, and they're going to make it difficult for you to make contact with that ball. But your goal is always the same. Your objective is always the same. It's to put bat to ball, right? But how you do so will need to change, right? You need to choke up on the bat, and you need to adjust your swing. Ultimately, you need to change what you are doing or how you are doing it, but the objective remains the same. And that is the same concept here too. When I'm talking about those priorities, how am I going to get protein in? How am I going to get fiber in? How am I going to get this movement in or this activity in? How am I going to get my sleep? Where is it going to be? What is it going to look like? That's going to change. That's going to differ. But the actual objective does not, right? So those two analogies frame the overall perspective around what we're trying to achieve, what actually dictates success during these periods of time. And remember, it is not unaltered action. It is behaviors being in alignment with the same priorities at all times. That's a little bit more conceptual in terms of what we're trying to do here. I do want to actually give you some tangible takeaways or strategies in terms of, well, how do I still prioritize protein? How do I still prioritize fiber? How do I still prioritize exercise when I'm out of my normal routine? Because that's what I'm going to give to you. Those are the things that we're going to discuss specifically if you are working with me as a one-on-one client, right? So the most common concerns from clients that I have from these responses that I got from this Instagram story, they're all kind of centered around two main elements, right? Diet and exercise, eating and workouts, essentially, in a nutshell. So let's start with the one that I think trips people up the most, and that is eating, right? And when it comes to those priorities that I listed, how do we make sure that we're still getting in enough protein? How do we make sure that we're still getting in enough fiber? When we aren't able to prepare the same foods that we normally do or the same meals that we normally do, we don't have access to the same meals, so on and so forth. And the answer to this is obviously it depends, right? It depends on where you're going to be, who you are staying with, what does your schedule look like, what do you have access to? So to introduce this concept or this segment where actual advice is being given, let's just assume the most advantageous position, right? We're sure you're not at home in your own kitchen, in your own environment, but you are staying at your parents' house or a sibling's home, essentially, where you can replicate the same environment relatively easily. You're just in a different physical location, right? So if you're staying with family, you can go grocery shopping, you can have groceries delivered to their address, or you can ask them to go grocery shopping for you, whether it be a sibling, whether it be a family member, or what have you, so that similar foods that you normally eat and that you normally prepare are on hand. They're in the pantry. They are in the fridge, right? And then you basically do what you normally do at home. You cook, you prepare, you meal prep as you typically would, depending on how long you're staying. Obviously, if it's just a couple of days, this might not be necessary, but let's just assume it's an entire week that you're staying at a family member's house. You have the ability to basically mirror or mimic your own personal environment there, as long as you have that relationship with your family, right? That could be a sticky situation, which we won't necessarily get into. But again, I'm assuming you have the most advantageous scenario present for that bit of advice is just treat it as if it is your home, right? Now, on the opposite side of that coin, let's assume that you basically have the bare minimum. You are staying at a hotel room where there is nothing but a mini fridge and a microwave, right? So you are limited to what you are able to both store and prepare in that scenario. And that is not a death sentence either. You do have options. There are ways to make that work for you as well, at least in a good enough way. Certainly not being perfect. Again, certainly we're not going to have a situation in which there is no unaltered action. The what is going to look different. What you're going to be eating, how you're going to hit that protein, what you're going to consume to get that fiber in might change a little bit, but you can still get it done in these situations with these couple of steps or these couple of tips. And I'm going to break this down by meal essentially. And in a situation like this, I do want to start off by saying that the goal is not to have every single meal be prepared, be tracked, be logged. When people are traveling, especially around the holidays, what I'll typically recommend is try and make sure that you get, like if you're having 3 meals per day on average, that you have 2 of them controlled, prepared by yourself, or something that's relatively easily trackable or estimatable, even if you're not preparing yourself or even if you're not tracking at all. You can kind of look at it and know that, hey, that has protein in it, that has fiber in it, so on and so forth. And then leave 1 meal per day up to be super flexible, whether it's a meal out at a restaurant, whether it's a meal at a family member's house and they're preparing it for you, you're dining in, so on and so forth, where we don't really have a hand on the construction of what that meal looks like. 2 out of 3 is pretty darn good for situations like this. So let's consider those 2 most common meals where that happens. That's going to be breakfast and lunch, because dinner is the one that's most commonly eaten out or consumed at a family member's house. That's when all the events and parties happen, et cetera, et cetera. So if you are in a hotel room, if you are in a place where you have literally nothing but a mini fridge and a microwave, right? Kind of like the bare essentials. What can you have for breakfast? The most common suggestions that I give are microwavable oatmeal packets that you can prepare or pair with a protein shake or a protein supplement that you either bring yourself or you get at the grocery store, whether they be ready to drink proteins, individual cartons or cans. I don't think they ever really actually come in cans. They'd be cartons or bottles rather. Or you can buy a small packet of powder at the grocery store, or obviously you could bring powder yourself depending on the method of travel that you are utilizing. Very easy to do if you're driving. You can certainly do it on a plane as well, especially if you have enough room, if you're checking your bag, etc. But oatmeal and protein. If you do not have access to, you can't find any, you don't have the protein to pair with that oatmeal, this is something that is going to be a little bit iffy for some people. Not everybody's going to be okay with doing this, but you can get, because this can be stored in the mini fridge, a carton of egg whites, and you are able to. It is safe to just drink that. You could also get some chocolate syrup or something and mix it together and basically create your own protein shake there, but you could just drink the egg whites. I've never actually recommended somebody do that, but you can. What I would actually recommend that you do is actually prepare that or cook that into the oats a little bit. Now, I will say don't do so initially on the onset of the preparation. Put your water into the oats first, warm it up maybe 75% of the way, and then pour some of the egg whites in and finish heating it up and finish cooking it, or just add in a little bit after the fact and make sure that it's a little bit dry. It's a little bit under moist, if you will, and then add the egg whites in after the fact and mix it together, and you won't even notice that it's in there, but it bulks up the protein content. So basically oats and protein, right? You also have the option of grabbing cottage cheese that you can store in the mini fridge. Some people like to eat that with just a little bit of salt and pepper. I personally think that that's horrendous. I think that that's disgusting. But if I mix it with enough canned peaches or enough canned pineapple, the ones specifically that have these that are like in the syrup that makes it more sweet, if you mix it together, boom, there's an option that gives you protein, gives you some carbs and some fiber there as well. You can also do the same type of thing with Greek yogurt, but with that, you don't necessarily need to have the canned fruit, that you can do more like fresh berries, blueberries, raspberries, so on and so forth, which also only need to be stored in a mini fridge. In all of those different options, you can add some chia seeds that don't need to be stored anywhere but on top of a desk or on top of the mini fridge. And you can add additional fiber into the oats, into the cottage cheese, and or the yogurt. And you can certainly pair those two together, right? You could have the oatmeal and the cottage cheese, or the oatmeal and the Greek yogurt, and then you don't have to go about having the protein supplements to pair with the oatmeal to complete and round out that meal. So there's three-ish breakfast options that you can utilize that don't really require any preparation other than warming something up in the microwave. Obviously, for the peaches and pineapples that I mentioned in terms of fruits to add to the cottage cheese, those do have to be the, unless you want to bring a can opener with you, which you could, but you can buy the pop top lids that you just need your hand, just like a soda can. Basically, you just pop it off. For lunches, we have a couple of different options. The first one that I typically recommend to people is just a standard loaf of bread with some deli meat. Again, stored in the mini fridge. Bread doesn't need to be stored in the fridge. Boom, we can make sandwiches that's very easily chuckable. It's very easily customizable in terms of how much meat, how much protein. You can also buy things like, romaine lettuce and pair that, put that on top and mix that into the sandwich. And that's super, super easy, super, super convenient. There are pre-made protein options that you can get at any grocery store. Even Walmart has the ones that are fully cooked chicken breasts, fully cooked beef products as well. They tend to be frozen. Not all of them. Some of them tend to be frozen, but that's okay if you're not going to end up staying where you're at for all that long anyway, or you're going to eat it relatively quickly. You just have to, thaw that out or put it in the microwave and warm that up. So you can have pre-cooked meats that you pair with microwavable bags of rice, or there's even the things, what's the Bob Evans, I think is the brand that you see most of them at the grocery store, that are just the tubs of they do have mac and cheese, but I was thinking of mashed potatoes, right? So you can pair that as a meal. There are things like bagged lentils that you can actually mix into that, rice, or you can mix that into mashed potatoes as well. I think it's a little bit more odd, but you can mix the pre-made chicken with microwavable rice and lentils, and then boom, you've got a meal with a decent amount of carbohydrates, fiber, and protein. You can do the same type of thing, but not mix it in rice, but rather have tortillas and make some type of tacos or burritos. Yesterday, I actually came up with something that I don't typically do, but I didn't have much on hand other than canned chicken that I had in my pantry from hurricane prep, and actually only had half of one, but a single avocado that was in my fridge. And I scraped all of the avocado powder into a bowl, mixed it with the canned chicken, and then actually topped that on some naan bread. And also I did one little piece of naan and also some just toasted bread, like toast, so like avocado toast, but with chicken salad, except there was no, I don't know what's normally in chicken salad, but no mayo, no egg. It was literally just avocado and canned chicken breast. And that's something that you could also pair with rice. You can put that in a bowl, mix that together. You could put that in a taco. You could put that on top of some bread. Again, all of these options basically give you multiple meals with a select group of ingredients that you can have on hand, whether they be shelf stable or just in the mini fridge, and with nothing that needs cooked in any way besides warmed up in the microwave. And again, the goal and intention there is to just prepare and control your diet for the majority of the day, right? It's not perfect, unaltered action. It's just make sure you're not going from controlling everything to controlling nothing. So 2/3, around 3/4 of your day being controlled, tracked, consistent, maintaining those priorities, still making contact with the ball, making sure that your ducks stay with you, and you're good, winning in that situation, right? So hopefully that helps from, again, I think the most challenging piece, which is the dietary aspect of travel. The other one, as you heard at the very beginning with some of these questions, was, finding a gym, making sure that I'm still getting in solid workouts during this time. And I think a lot of these fears come from the thought that if I take any time off at all, I am going to lose all of my progress immediately like that. And I first and foremost want to reassure you that that is absolutely not the case in any way, shape, or form. There has been some recent research done in this area to kind of find out how long it actually takes for you to lose muscle specifically, but let's just generalize that concept a little bit and say, how long does it take for you to lose general fitness adaptations? And ultimately, there's no specific answer here. It depends on a lot of things, but it's a number of weeks of doing nothing, of being kind of completely detrained before you start to lose muscle, lose fitness adaptation. And I have to throw in there, that is very nuanced, and you could certainly be losing some strength performance outcomes, but not necessarily muscle tissue. So it depends on what fitness adaptations we're talking about, but it's very minimal. It is very marginal what you will lose if you do nothing at all for, let's just call it 2 straight weeks. And along those same lines, if you want to consider not doing nothing at all, because it's okay if you do, but most people can and want to and will do something, right? The concept that I think too many people overlook, whether they, aren't aware of it or not, or maybe they don't actually believe in it, is that the amount of work, the amount of total, not necessarily effort, but total work that it takes to maintain your muscle tissue, maintain your fitness adaptations is so much lower than the amount of work that it takes to build new muscle tissue, to progress in your fitness. Let's say, for example, for some person, it requires 15 hard sets of an exercise to build muscle per week, hard sets per week on average. That's a decent amount of training. That's a decent amount of effort, a decent amount of time to build new adaptations, to build new muscle, right? To create new adaptations and build new muscle tissue. The amount that it takes to sustain what has been built, maybe 2 hard sets per week on average. I don't know the exact metric, but it is low. It is a very, very minimal amount, and not enough people appreciate that fact, and not enough people admit how beautiful that truly is in situations like this, so that you can go from doing 4 days per week in the gym, where each session you are doing 4 to 5 hard sets, to maybe I'm doing 1 training session this week, at least for that muscle group, and I'm doing 1 to 2, maybe 3 hard sets, and that's all that I need to do. And I'm going to maintain every bit of progress that I have made. And when we can admit that, accept that, acknowledge that, that opens up the doors for such basic, accessible training and exercise that people would feel a lot more comfortable and confident traveling without any worry that they are going to backslide, right? Because what that means is, all right, maybe if I only do this once per week, maybe twice, a couple of hard sets of push-ups, a couple of hard sets of lunges or Bulgarian split squats, and a couple of hard sets of, let's just say, some type of inverted row, whether you grab, if you had some type of bar that you can invert yourself from and hang underneath, whether you do that under a dining table. I've recommended that people use either bed sheets or towels and wrap them over a door frame, close the door, and then do body weight rows that way. We're talking about 3 exercises, 1 to 3 hard sets, 1 to 3 times per week, which might take you 20 minutes, depending on the rest period in between. And that's all you need to do. No worries. All is good in the world. How relieving would that be, right? And you might be hearing that and thinking, yeah, it must be nice, but it's not hypothetical. Like, it could be that simple. Truly. And I think the other concept that that would be helpful for more of us to adopt is that some time off from time to time, whether we go or just considering time off being going from 4 gym days to a couple of bodyweight exercises, or going from 4 gym days to literally doing nothing, but maybe walking, and then that's it, and that being our exercise. As long as we go into that, assuming and accepting that that's okay, that that's just not bad, that that's not a death sentence, but rather that's, keeping our priorities the same, that's good mentally and physically from time to time. And so if that happens every year around the holidays, you're kind of like, yeah, I deviate from my norm. I'm not as active as I normally am. I don't exercise as much as I normally do, or lift as hard. I don't eat as well. That's okay. Some time off from time to time can actually do us really, really well. And that can segue really nicely into the beginning of the year, because that is when the motivations are the most high for most people, because the New Year's resolution people, they have something right there. They've leveraged that new year, new me energy, and they roll with it, right? And so if you take that little bit of a break and then come back, knowing that that little bit of a break didn't actually set you back, but now you're rested and rejuvenated, then you're just going to be that much better off going into the new year. So hopefully from both a dietary and an exercise standpoint, that gives you some, abstract thoughts to in different perspectives to take, but also some concrete actionable steps that you can utilize to maintain your priorities and shift your expectation from unaltered action to behavior that is still in alignment with the outcome that you are ultimately trying to create for yourself. And if that ends up looking like completely different actions, but attention to the same priorities, then in my opinion, that is mission accomplished. That's something to feel good about. That's how you stay consistent for the long haul. And that's all that I have for this week, maybe even for the rest of the year. I don't have another live call scheduled until Wednesday, January 8th. So I wanted to make sure that I got up something between now and then. Hopefully you found this helpful. Hopefully you enjoy the rest of your holiday season. And as always, if you found this discussion helpful, be sure to subscribe on whatever platform it is that you tune in. And remember, when it comes to your health and fitness, there are no right answers. There's only nuance. I'm John Knoll. Thanks for listening.